his intensity of emotions not only was obviously demonstrated in his life, but was in each little drawing, you know, or even in the poetry that he wrote on the walls. There was such an intensity, you immediately feel that you are in front of a real poet. Even when the poetry were very minimal, like he wrote famous, you know, pay for soup, build a fort, set it on fire. Lapidary sentences, you know, really extremely intense but poetic. And this he did everywhere, in all the ways, with images, with numbers, with lines, with the crowns, which were somehow his signature, with his ideas about when he listed elements where he would put salt, gold, but also asbestos. Immediately the whole thing became a political issue and a social issue, just by the presence of that word. In a painting like Per Capita, where he lists the capital income of all the various states of the United States, you know, you just need to compare the numbers and it becomes political because it tells you a few truths. In works when he lists the human jobs, the works that people do, immediately you identify who does what and who is the oppressed and who is the oppressor. In other works where he also drew the teepee of the American Indian, already it's political because he speaks for an American culture which has been forgotten or not given enough attention. So in every work, in every paintings or drawings, his concerns were social and political and ideological, as well as intimate and poetic. The political life that Jean-Michel had was always on his own first skin. In other words, it was felt from the moment he stepped, I suppose, from his bed out in the street to the way that he painted. It was always felt politics. It was completely authentic. So he did not have the rhetoric of the politics that some other times artists have. Political artists often use the rhetorics of the politics. Jean-Michel was the poetic of the politics. He was political, and he was, you know, you see it in all his work. From the, as I said before, from the paintings that have a subject of the American Indian, or paintings that I've shown in the first public address, there were a lot of paintings of minorities. It's funny because there was a painting of a rabbi, there was a painting of an Indian, but there was also a painting of a cop, of a policeman. But anyway, it was also a minority there. Maybe the irony was that he was together listed with the minorities. He did not have an aesthetic strategy. That was not of his concern. His strategy was human. His strategy was life. He admired the painters like Twombly immensely. I think that in many of his paintings the presence of Picasso is felt. But he did not have a strategy like other artists might consider the art world. All the world, the art world, life, the places that his fantasy would get in contact with, were part of a larger scale, and art, paintings, were just part of his life. The idea of graffiti and primitivism, that's inaccurate. Morphologically is inaccurate. I hope in the future there will be a morphological study of his work where the various signs and the various images are actually listed and connected to cultural sources. And that would demonstrate how instead this culture was wide and not primitive, and is using it and is covering up of certain informations, adding them to others, agglomerating information was instead very sophisticated. And this agglomeration of information, in which you use parts of it, was his language, and is a very modern and innovative attitude. So his work is not just an assemblage or collage of forms or material, but it's an assemblage and a collage of poetic and cultural moods and themes and information, and that's what's interesting about his work.
Can you tell me how he started working in this room, and you know how in this room here, how did that come about?
Because he wanted to do some larger paintings, but he did not have a studio. He had been crashing and sleeping in the houses of various people, and he needed a place to work, and this basement was not fixed up like it is now. He didn't have a carpet because he would have made a total mess of it, but there was the space and there was a skylight, and he could work here. So he started to work here, but shortly after, he also needed a loft, and so he found a loft in Crosby Street, which is close by. And even though he made many paintings in Crosby Street, he liked to paint here, especially the larger canvas, and he would work at several of them together, and he would sometimes receive his friends, and there are still telephone numbers of his friends that are just slightly covered by the paint, so you know, because he would call them up. He would come often early in the morning when the gallery was opening and would have breakfast together with some of the people of the gallery, which is something that I discourage because otherwise my assistants get too fat. But he would bring all kinds of food for everybody that he would buy from Dean and DeLuca, and then would come down here and would start to paint, and would jump up and down this space, passing from one painting to another, using that thing with the wheels, which we have in the, you know, I don't know, it's a kind of thing with dolly, which he had spray paint and other paint that he would carry on close to the painting in order to paint. And then he would have pads of drawings where he would walk on top of them, you know, and draw. And it is true, the collectors would want to come and they were curious to see him. And sometimes he would want to meet the people, like for instance, once he met Mick Jagger, he was very interested in meeting Mick Jagger. Sometimes he met some European people and he liked to meet them. And sometimes he would receive his friends, and sometimes he wouldn't want to see anybody. But he also worked in Crosby Street, which was close by. He put out all the best he could give to the world in his paintings and all his ideas. He was so ready to give it to everybody. He was extremely generous as a person and as an artist.